So we're going to start off. We talked a little bit yesterday. Scott Miller kicked the event off talking about cloud. Cloud, clearly a topic for a number of the customers in the audience, and each of your organizations taking specific investment in cloud strategies. So I want to first start off with the most difficult part about cloud, and that's providing some groundwork or framework with which to operate the conversation in. So very simply, if we define cloud as an automated, orchestrated, transferable workload and just started with that, and to an extent, I think we could talk about SaaS, but I'd like to leave that off the table. And I think everyone kind of understands what that is. So if we talked about cloud in that context, I want to open it up to your organizations, talk about strategy, and maybe from a CIO perspective, sharing your organization's strategy around that, and then clearly some talent from a vendor and market perspective seated up here as well. So your cloud strategy and how you're going about implementing that cloud strategy.
I can talk about that, and you want to jump in, Kim, later. So we definitely have a cloud strategy, and I know you said leave SaaS off the table, but the way that we view the world really is a hybrid state of some of on-premise SaaS and then really infrastructure or public cloud that we're using. And how we've gone about is we've really looked at the workload that we have internally to NetApp, and we said by workload type, what type of workload would qualify to actually go out to the cloud. And we're really looking at what we're calling more of the low-value workload or the lower-value workload. I won't say low because it's important to some of our users. So you can think about some of the departmental systems that might be web-based. We've hosted some of our intranet or internal intranet out to the cloud, things like that. On-premise, we're keeping what we call our systems of differentiation, our systems of records, so our ERP. But we've really gone and looked really across the grid at the different business areas that we have and the capabilities, the type of workloads, and said, here are candidates to go out to the cloud because it's well suited for that area.
At Intel, we've been in the cloud for about 3 years. We started with a in-house on-prem solution. We transitioned last year to OpenStack hybrid cloud where we're bursting out, really just for burst capability, out to the public cloud and bringing it in. We have about 75% of our Office and Enterprise applications running in our cloud today. And we think maybe 85% is the upper threshold. Some applications aren't going to perform well in that environment, or we need to keep them in a DMZ, or there's other security reasons. So we probably think the threshold is close to 85%. And we've seen tremendous cost advantages, which is good. I think from a business perspective, though, on value, it's the speed of which provisioning the applications gives your application developers a time-to-market advantage, and that's been really advantageous for us.
Yeah, and speed has been something that's come up. We spoke briefly this morning about what are the drivers to a cloud strategy, right? And costs, the financials behind it being one aspect of it. And I know there are organizations up here on the stage that are working very hard to address the financial aspect of it, but also in terms of flexibility, offer solutions that provide flexibility. So if some of the panelists could maybe talk about your strategy around that flexibility and delivering that as a business value element.
Well, I think one of the things that EMCO is going to talk about is we're 100% cloud. So we started with our partnership with VMware in a virtualized environment, and actually run 3 data centers in 3 geos, EMEA, Asia, and the US, and we are 100% cloud, primarily hybrid. Okay, the bulk of the workloads are internal. There are some that go outside. Again, low-level workloads is what our CIO would call them. And actually, our CIO team works with customers on a regular basis as they transform their journey to a cloud configuration. And we've been doing it. So the good thing is, as they walk through with customers, with our own sales team, with partners that we have, we can tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can tell them everything that we didn't do right, everything we had to do over again because we didn't do it right the first time. And we have 52,000 employees, and this does include the implementation of mobile devices. So my iPad, my iPhone, everything is run through the internal EMC cloud from our perspective. And while we will use some things in the public cloud, it's a hybrid. But we've had it running now for about 4 years, completely, everybody on the cloud in the entire company. So we believe in the cloud, and in this case, as you'd say, we eat our own dog food, and so we've been doing it for a long time, and know all the ins, the outs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we see a lot of value in it. It's cut our costs, give us a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Yeah, I'd like to add, at Citrix, and first off, thanks for having an event that celebrates the geek. I think this is a fantastic thing, so thank you all for showing up, and it's fantastic. At Citrix, we took a little bit of a different approach. So I manage the sales engineering organization, and one of the bigger struggles we always had was delivering demos and POCs to our customers. It's a very, it's a powerful workload, right? So it's one of our most important because it shows what our technology does. So we embraced the cloud very early on, probably about 4 years ago, and really adopted putting all of our infrastructure up in the cloud to demo. So as a sales engineer, I can quickly log in, I can provision out an environment, and actually show our customers. And this is a fantastic piece for us because, first off, most of our wives are very happy that we don't have all of the infrastructure in the basement or in the closet at our house. So they're very happy that we took that out of there, so that the noise was killing them. But ultimately, it was really about showing our technology. Delivering it over the WAN, showing the performance, showing how it works, and being able to give it to the customer in a simple and easy way, that really adds huge value to our organization. And the cloud really is important there.
So I'll give a couple of different perspectives maybe on what we're seeing out there. So kind of to, I think the point's been made already. I mean, cloud's happening in a lot of different ways, and I think we're finally starting to see a little bit of maturation around where do you put things and how do you look at it. So on the HP side, we kind of see 4 different, iterations of it, right? One is, the standard private cloud, stuff you build on-prem. So we do that today. The other area is, where, we're actually hosting a public cloud service, kind of like an Amazon. So we've got that part of the business. And we're seeing a lot of momentum there, mostly in terms of what I would call, validation. And what I mean by this is you look at, I think it was this week, in fact, where the CIA decides to utilize Amazon, not the public cloud services, but a lot of the Amazon methodology to build out their private label cloud. And I think that gives instant credibility to that sort of a business model. So we're starting to see that happening as well. So the workloads are starting to mature there, especially as the providers get more value-added capability into that public cloud. So moving from pure infrastructure as a service or object storage and these sort of things into something that's going to be of higher value. The fourth area is we provide managed cloud, and this is kind of I think a next breakthrough area where you want on-prem capability, but you want someone else to be on the hook for providing that, and that provides financial benefit to you in the fact that you don't carry that capital on your paper, and I think that's a key area. And probably the most fascinating area for us has been in the partner area. This is where you see a lot of different variations on the theme, really around these partner programs where you're providing this capability for others to customize and bring out that capability out to the market. We see our obligation on that, frankly, to help normalize maybe some of the things that are out there that started off maybe 2 or 3 years ago where everyone was kind of doing a little bit of their own thing. We were certainly guilty of that. And that was a good thing because we needed to get that capability out. There were no normalizing standards. And I think what's happening now is with OpenStack coming out to the marketplace in a much more commercially viable way. And really, we're looking at that as really the great normalizer between these particular instantiations because customers have told us, hey, we want to have a common API environment because as we transit workloads and move them around, that's the most critical piece, right? Because you don't want to have to redo workloads and so forth. So we see that, and we've been retooling a lot of what we're doing in each of those 4 instantiations so that we have that consistency across the board so that regardless of where that workload starts or where you start hosting it, you have the ability then of moving that pretty transparently versus having to, again, redo that work. So that's kind of been our experience so far from what we've seen out there in working with clients on this.
And I think you bring up an important point, and I'll like VMware to comment on this as well. But part of it is in terms of the burstable or portable workloads. An important aspect of that is how are those workloads managed and how do they run, and how is that going to work with your cloud provider and with what ease and OpenStack being a leveling the playing field there maybe a little bit, but also from a portability perspective, what you have here. How you match that up with the resources you have outside of your primary data center is a key element to that flexibility and scalability aspect of what you need to do.
Yeah, so it is really important that you understand how things run. And what we're finding is we're bursting out. The technical capabilities are there, but the policies that you're transitioning from are typically inhibitors. You have to really look at every policy to manage that burst, as well as the skills are different to manage in a bursting environment around there. So those are two things that I think are challenges that come up in the midst of transition that probably need a little bit more forethought. The technology is perfectly capable to go there, but you have to have the policies and the skill set to run it optimally as you go too.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would say that also just the general skills in an IT organization need to change in order to really manage and be able to sustain a cloud environment. In some respects, cloud is scary to the traditional IT person. So you have to get them on board, and you have to really do a skill upgrade. In our case, I actually took some of our architects and, sent them, away to cloud school to understand what the architectures were all about. Because you have to architect your applications differently to take advantage of everything that Kim is talking about. And they came back with their eyes opened. It was like, wow, if we had known this, we would have architected these applications differently and done things in a different manner. So there's a skill change out too, just overall.
Yeah. The depth model where you're deep into servers or deep into network or deep into the applications has to be complemented with a breadth model where you understand all of the technology stack. And we did the same. The good news is you can't go out and buy a cloud architect. You can't buy a cloud administrator. You have to build them. And so it's a great natural skills enhancement opportunity for IT professionals.
We've seen the same thing at Cisco. 10 years ago, everybody remembers the convergence of voice and data and how that affected our organizations. And when we started introducing the cloud 4 years ago, the same thing started to happen. And as a result, it was kind of interesting. A lot of the executives were going to the CIO and saying, we're having problems with that point of demarcation between servers and storage and compute and operating systems. And so the leadership team went off and basically came back with a proposal, and now our entire IT organization is operated as a service organization. So we have an organization responsible for the architecture of compute, network, storage, and operating system, another organization responsible for the design, another organization for the implementation, and another one for actually support, and that seems to work. And there's some issues that come along with that, but we've learned how to mitigate those as well. You put a room of architects together, it's like a room of geeks. Everybody else is just out of the picture, right? I did want to mention that Cisco's about 4 years into a 6-year journey. We had a lot of really serious problems. Similar to, I was chatting with my colleague over here from HP. 4 years ago, we were growing at over 40% in storage year over year, 30% in compute year over year. We were running out of power, space, and cooling. We had 175 data centers, and we needed to do something. And so we started an overall strategy to consolidate, to virtualize, and automate, and that's where the cloud came into the picture. The other thing is it took us 6 to 8 weeks to deliver infrastructure as a service inside of our data centers. That was unacceptable. So we picked a target of 2 days, and to be honest, we didn't know exactly how to get there back then. And we ended up working with some outside companies and acquiring companies, NewScale and Tidal, and partnering with VMware to actually build that. So we've gone from a 6 to 8 week delivery time down to 15-minute SLA in our cloud. We're about 86% virtualized, and it's exciting. And by the way, since most of the people here are geeks, when you build a private cloud, you have to influence people to want to try this, right? Because there's risk associated with it. So what we did for the engineers, because we have over 25,000 engineers, we used the word free for 30 days. You say free to an engineer, that's like cops to donuts, bees to honey. They're coming, right? And so we've been able to influence a lot of the engineering community to come try this out. And as a result, to date, we've reduced our TCO by 70%. But we get credit for actually shutting down a lot of these data centers, just like HP does. A lot of companies don't have as many data centers, so our TCO drop just from compute and network as a result of the cloud has been 26%. So it's very compelling. And from a CIO perspective, I think the hardest thing that any CIO has to deal with is available budget to actually spend on innovation and to build the business. It's hard because it's a very small piece of the pie. And as a result of this automation in the cloud environment, it's enabled us to go, I can't tell you the exact numbers, but we've bumped up 10% of available budget to that overall number to actually build in innovation. And that's very powerful from an IT perspective.
Yeah, I think my colleagues here, I think, have said, I think some really impactful things, and our customers have clearly articulated where I think the focus for all of these vendors needs to be. The only thing I would add is that in addition to VMware's strategy of extending what we've done with compute virtualization to storage and networking to get obviously cost savings and increase business agility, I think that the thing that we all need to do is make sure we're aligning to what our CIOs were saying here, and that how do you apply policy and how do you ensure governance, whether you're in a private or a public cloud scenario? Because I heard the CIO from NetApp mention that a lot of the public cloud use cases are for low governance workloads. These may be highly business relevant and in fact revenue impacting efforts that are underway where developers go to the public cloud to develop. But at some point, IT still has an obligation to extend governance over those workloads, and getting visibility to those is something I think that has to happen from the software level. And that is certainly, when we talk about VMware strategy, I would say that is where we're trying to apply a lot of focus, is to ensure that the customers like Intel and NetApp can get that visibility and make sure that policy impacts or controls those workloads regardless of whether they're a private or public cloud scenario.
Good, very good. One follow-up question that I would have for the group around cloud. We've talked about points of entry into the public cloud space, and dev test workloads come up just in terms of risk and other things, and Matt kind of dovetailing with what you said. You're all, in a way, supporting engineering organizations, right? And Bob, you talked about the ability to provision environments, get people out there with labs and hands-on type of things. Maybe talk a little bit in more detail around what are you using to recoup some of those resources or do the financial management side of things in terms of allocated resources out to a business unit, and what capabilities do you have there, as well as preventing a scenario maybe where you have 15,000 engineers with 4 or 5 labs each and managing that?
It's probably one of the biggest challenges that all of us face when you have a lot of labs and a lot of folks that are developing. I think education is extremely important when you're moving to a cloud environment and setting expectations accordingly as to what people are going to actually receive. I think there's a big still misperception. A lot of people think that they don't quite understand cloud, so from an engineering community, they'd still rather have a physical device underneath their desk or in a lab or something like that. And we're trying to change that influence of people to move into this new environment. And what we're finding is from a CPU, memory, storage, we're enabling our engineers to actually do their jobs more efficiently and quickly. And for most people that have worked with business units, one of our biggest challenges was a business unit will start a project, maybe buy 50 servers, and do the project for 6 months, and they all go out for pizza and beer. And then they start the next project, and then those 50 servers just sit there. We did a comprehensive audit 4 years ago, and of the 11 petabytes that we had back then, it's embarrassing, but it was 19%. That's unacceptable. So as a result of this new thing, what we're doing is we're asking people to come to this private cloud, and when they're done, because we have a chargeback model, when they're done using that computer, that infrastructure, they just stop paying, and it comes back into the pool. And as a result of that, we've been able to change that utilization or the capacity to 73% on storage. That's another opportunity to actually reduce costs significantly.
I think you got to be I agree with Bob on a couple things here. Number one, it's hard to beat free, and we've seen this work really, really well with our engineering community. One of the things that we kind of realized from the get-go anyways, right, and this kind of goes back to policy and governance, is if you don't do this, you're gonna create an environment where, policy or not, someone's going to look at going outside and procuring these resources, right? Using a credit card and putting it on your OpEx account is pretty easy to do these days. So The free part works really well. We've kept ourselves from going to too fine-grained a chargeback model to date. And this is just more religious on our end, right? Primarily because we don't want to stifle what's there. So the way that we've looked at it, in a way, and again, we work for a large vendor, so kind of take this with a grain of salt. Infrastructure is relatively cheap, right? So our approach on this has been, we can provide that, all you can drink, as long as you can stay within the constructs, including the tools that we're providing that are standardized. What we don't want is to have application and tool creep. What we do want is real easy access to those instantiations. So we've made it very clear that as long as you stay within the boundary of the code base and making sure that you have that consistency, quite honestly, we'll provide you as much horsepower as we can possibly provide, right, and make it easy to do and not do it where you're constantly counting your pennies and dimes. So, at some point we may institute more of a interdepartmental or a very fine-grained chargeback model. We haven't gotten there yet, and I guess we'll see that with some maturation, but at least within our organization, we really haven't seen that as much yet.
So with us, the key thing has been the cooperation between IT, finance, and the lines of business. So as an example, we've got 2,500 people in my division. We're called the Unified Storage Division of EMC, multi-billion-dollar division, but we have hundreds of millions of hardware, hundreds of millions. So, of course, finance comes to the engineering VPs, not me because I only got 75 people, but the engineering guys have over 2,000. So they came to them and said, look, you're spending way too much on hardware. You guys got to figure out how to manage this. And basically, our divisional president, quite honestly, MBO'd all of the VPs on cutting our hardware expense and getting our budget down. So if finance and IT work together, we don't have a specific chargeback, but in our case, and I'm sure HP and Cisco are similar, it's hundreds of millions. Well, they probably are in billions, even at cost, of hardware sitting around the companies. Our division alone had hundreds of millions. So by finance and IT working together and then enforcing that, and then it sort of worked its way down. We did the free for engineering too, but when all the VPs are told, look, if you guys don't control your budgets, you're not going to get paid, it worked. And the IT sort of brought that with finance into the divisions, saying you guys will control this so that we can manage our budgets on the IT side and on the finance side. And for all of you, you guys can do the same thing by working with your finance guys to work to cut the company budget, which is what we were trying to do with our cloud infrastructure, is not just deliver better service, but also manage all the hardware. And, we're primarily a software company. We actually have very few hardware engineers in the company, but we consume tons and tons of hardware to do all the testing. And and to do the development. That's what costs big money.
Yeah. So a bit of a different approach.
Can I just add one thing before? Yeah. Because we did something similar, but there's one key step that is pivotal to success, and that is to change your capacity planning model. So the way capacity planning is done in a pre-cloud environment is by project. Have new projects, need new servers, need new storage, and you plan for it and you order it. In a cloud environment, you have, and so think of that as a, build on demand signal. You need to change, you got to build on plan. You got to know ahead of time what's coming and carry a level of inventory such that you can provision for that. And that's a discussion with the CFO, because now you're shifting to a planning metric instead of an actual project metric. And it's a big shift, much more accurate. We carry 15 days on hand of cloud capacity. That's our model. And anytime we go below that, we order more. But I think capacity planning is one of those things you have to look at and figure out how to do it differently than in the cloud environment.
Yeah, I mean, at Citrix, and going back to what we were talking about earlier with just being able to on-demand the environments for demos and POCs, the real value that we saw was, first off, you have a few hundred engineers that are running around out there with all these labs, so they have the budget of buying all these machines, trying to acquire all these machines, so that budget was huge for us. We turned it around and we're able to go into more of a on-demand model using public cloud services, and we're charged really $1 an hour. I mean, if you think about the cost there and the savings imperative to trying to buy machines again and again and again for these engineers at home, they're constantly changing them. They're constantly having to update the software on them. So it becomes a very big expense just in their time. And if they're at their house and their kid decides to pull the plug out on it, it pretty much goes down and they don't have a demo to show. So this allowed them to be very flexible and very easy to show their technology. So it's fantastic. Cloud has been amazing for us.
Some parallels there in terms of the engineering environments or labs to just general data center consolidation as an organization and bringing those centrally back.